London, 1998. Construction workers are renovating 36 Craven Street, Benjamin Franklin's former London residence. The Friends of Benjamin Franklin House want to transform the dilapidated Georgian townhouse into a museum honoring America's founding father. 1 month into renovations, a worker named Jim Field is excavating a windowless basement room beneath what was once the garden. He discovers a pit about 1 meter wide and 1 meter deep, and sticking out of the dirt is a human thigh bone. Field calls the police. The excavation continues. More bones, then more. By the time they finish, they've uncovered over 1,200 bone fragments, the remains of at least 15 human bodies, including 6 children. Tests reveal the bones are approximately 200 years old. They were buried around the time Benjamin Franklin lived in the house, from 1757 to 1775, during the years leading up to American independence. A founding father, a basement full of human remains. It's a sensational discovery that immediately sparks speculation. Was Franklin a serial killer? Did he conduct dark experiments? Was this some Masonic ritual site? The truth is stranger and more fascinating than any murder mystery. This is the story of William Hewson's anatomy school, the resurrection men who supplied it, and how Benjamin Franklin's London home became a secret dissection laboratory. Franklin's London years, 1757 to 1775. Benjamin Franklin didn't live in London because he liked the weather. He was there on colonial business, representing Pennsylvania, then later Georgia, New Jersey, and Massachusetts in their dealings with the British government. He rented rooms at 36 Craven Street from a widow named Margaret Stevenson. The location was perfect, just off the Strand, close to government offices near the Thames. Franklin lived there on and off for 16 years, from 1757 to 1775, leaving only when the American Revolution made his position untenable. During those years, Franklin wasn't just a diplomat. He was a scientist, inventor, and intellectual celebrity. He conducted electrical experiments, invented the lightning rod and bifocals, corresponded with Europe's greatest minds. He was curious about everything, including medicine and anatomy, which is how he met William Hewson, the brilliant anatomist. William Hewson was born November 14, 1739, one of 11 children, very few of whom survived to adulthood. He came to London from northern England to study medicine, and quickly distinguished himself. Hewson studied under William Hunter, one of the most famous anatomists and obstetricians of the era. Hunter ran a prestigious anatomy school, and Hewson became his star pupil and research partner. Hewson's specialty was the lymphatic system. In 1770, he conducted a groundbreaking experiment at the Royal Society. He injected mercury into a dead green sea turtle to trace the flow of lymphatic vessels. The experiment was revolutionary, proving that the lymphatic system existed in species beyond humans. For this work, Hewson was awarded the Copley Medal, the Royal Society's highest honor, first awarded in 1731 for the most important scientific discovery or for the greatest contribution made by experiment. On March 8, 1770, Hewson was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. He was only 31 years old. Benjamin Franklin attended that Royal Society meeting. He was impressed. The two men became friends. And then, Hewson fell in love with Polly Stevenson, the daughter of Franklin's landlady. The anatomy school at Craven Street. Polly Stevenson and William Hewson married in 1770. Franklin adored Polly. He treated her like a second daughter. He'd mentored her education, corresponded with her about science and philosophy. When she told him about Hewson, Franklin wrote back, feigning jealousy, but then goes on to say that he must be someone rather extraordinary if she's taken an interest in him. After the wedding, Hewson and Polly moved into 36 Craven Street with her mother. Hewson needed work. He'd had a falling out with William Hunter over scientific credit and access to research materials. Franklin helped mediate the dispute, but Hewson decided to strike out on his own. In September 1772, Hewson opened his own anatomy school in the back of 36 Craven Street. The location was ideal. Tyburn Gallows, where public hangings were conducted, was just half a mile away. Hungerford Dock, where bodies could be discreetly delivered from ships, was at the end of the street. A graveyard sat behind the house, and the basement room was windowless, private, and large enough for dissections. Hewson gave lectures, conducted anatomy classes, taught students the revolutionary practice of hands-on dissection. As one historian notes, this was a time that they were looking at practical dissections as an art of teaching, and instead of just researching these things and reading about them, there was much more of a hands-on approach to medicine and science. But there was a problem: getting bodies, the resurrection men. In 18th-century England, dissection was legally murky. The Anatomy Act wouldn't make body procurement fully legal until 1832, 58 years in the future. A 1752 law allowed anatomists to dissect executed murderers, but there weren't nearly enough bodies to meet demand. Anatomy was growing as a field of study. Private schools were opening. Students needed practice, and the supply of legally executed murderers couldn't keep up. So anatomists turned to the black market. Enter the resurrection men, professional grave robbers who stole fresh corpses from cemeteries and sold them to anatomy schools. The resurrection men worked at night. They'd watch funerals, noting where bodies were buried. Then, under cover of darkness, they'd dig up the graves, steal the corpses, and transport them via the Thames to anatomy schools across London. It was illegal, dangerous, but lucrative. Bodies commanded high prices, and anatomists weren't in a position to ask questions about where their specimens came from. 36 Craven Street was perfectly positioned for this trade. Resurrection men could smuggle bodies from graveyards via the Thames side wharf at the end of the street, or acquire fresh cadavers from Tyburn Gallows at the other end. The bodies would arrive at night, through the back door, into Hewson's basement laboratory, where they'd be dissected, studied, and eventually buried in the pit beneath the garden. The evidence in the bones. When researchers analyzed the 1,200 bone fragments found in 1998, they discovered compelling evidence linking them to Hewson's anatomy school. First, the bones show clear marks from surgical instruments. One femur had been cut cleanly, demonstrating the process of amputation, a valuable skill when battlefield injuries were common and sterilization was unknown. Multiple skulls had small circles drilled out, evidence of trepanning, a procedure to relieve pressure on the brain. Second, animal bones were found alongside human remains. 43 different species, including dogs, pigs, and turtles. Comparative anatomy, dissecting animals to understand human anatomy, was common practice. The animal bones showed saw cuts in similar positions to cuts on human skeletons, suggesting they were used for teaching purposes. Third, the smoking gun. Among the bones, researchers found a turtle spine with traces of liquid mercury. Remember Hewson's famous 1770 Royal Society experiment? He'd injected mercury into a turtle to trace the lymphatic system. And here, in the basement pit at Craven Street, was a turtle spine with mercury residue. This wasn't circumstantial. This was direct, physical evidence linking the bones to Hewson's documented scientific work. Professor Simon Hewson of University College London, who analyzed the remains, stated, "The find of mercury in association with the bones of a turtle is a very clear association with Hewson." Did Franklin know? The question everyone asks, did Benjamin Franklin know about the anatomy school in his basement? The answer is almost certainly yes. Franklin lived in the house. Hewson was his friend and protégé. Franklin had helped Hewson get elected to the Royal Society. He supported Hewson's scientific career. As Marcia Baliciano, director of the Benjamin Franklin House Museum, explains, Franklin was a champion of science. He was supportive of young researchers and others that could exemplify his passion for knowledge and innovation. He probably loved the idea that this scientific work would be going on. There's evidence Franklin may have stayed elsewhere in London for periods while Hewson was conducting dissections, possibly to maintain plausible deniability, or simply because dissection labs were noisome, smelly, messy places, not conducive to diplomatic work. Did Franklin participate in dissections himself? Probably not. He was busy with colonial politics. But did he know bodies were being dissected in his basement? Almost certainly. Franklin was a scientist. He understood the value of anatomical study. He'd seen the benefits of hands-on medical education. He supported Hewson's work, both financially and morally. The Friends of Benjamin Franklin House believe it's unlikely he participated in the actual dissections, but acknowledge he was aware of and supportive of Hewson's anatomy school. The tragic end. William Hewson's career was brilliant but brief. On May 1st, 1774, while conducting a dissection, Hewson accidentally cut himself with a contaminated instrument. He contracted septicemia, blood poisoning, and died within days. He was only 34 years old. Franklin was devastated. He wrote to his wife, Deborah, "Our family here is in great distress. Poor Mrs. Hewson has lost her husband, and Mrs. Stevenson, her son-in-law. He died last Sunday morning of a fever which baffled the skill of our best physicians. He was an excellent young man, ingenious, industrious, useful, and beloved by all that knew him." Hewson left behind Polly and 3 young children. Franklin helped support the family financially. After the American Revolution, Polly moved with her children to Philadelphia to be near Franklin. The anatomy school at Craven Street closed. The bodies buried in the basement remained undisturbed for over 200 years, until Jim Field found that first bone in 1998. What it reveals. The bones in Franklin's basement tell us several important things about 18th-century medicine and science. First, anatomical study was advancing rapidly but operating in legal gray areas. Dissection was necessary for medical progress but socially taboo and legally restricted. Anatomists had to operate discreetly, using questionable sources for cadavers. Second, scientific mentorship mattered. Franklin's support allowed Hewson to establish his own school and continue groundbreaking research. Without Franklin's backing, both financial and reputational, Hewson might never have made his discoveries. Third, the proximity of legitimate science and grave robbing was uncomfortably close. The same bodies stolen from grieving families by resurrection men became the subjects of experiments that advanced medical knowledge and saved lives. And fourth, progress has costs. Hewson died doing the work he loved. The families whose loved ones were stolen from graves never knew their bodies' advanced science. The ethical questions raised by 18th-century anatomy still echo today in debates about consent, bodily autonomy, and medical research. The final burial. Today, 36 Craven Street operates as the Benjamin Franklin House Museum. Visitors can see the basement room where the bones were found. The museum displays some of the bone fragments and explains Hewson's anatomy school. The bones themselves, after analysis and documentation, were reburied in a consecrated ceremony. They'd served science twice, once in the 1770s for Hewson students, and again in the 1990s when they revealed the history of 18th-century anatomy. The sensational headline, "Bodies Found in Ben Franklin's Basement," turned out not to be a murder mystery but a science story. A reminder that medical progress often happens in uncomfortable circumstances, that great minds sometimes work in morally ambiguous spaces, that the pursuit of knowledge doesn't always follow neat, ethical lines. Benjamin Franklin didn't kill anyone. He didn't conduct dark experiments. He didn't harbor murderers. He just let his friend run an anatomy school in the basement, where bodies procured by grave robbers were dissected to advance medical science, which, depending on your perspective, is either noble or disturbing. Probably both.